thrown out by her father for having a child early, unaware. The child father is the Alpha King. 3 words from his enemy's lips would destroy everything King Kieran had built. Choose your crown. Princess Celeste's ultimatum was simple: abandon the peasant woman and bastard child he'd secretly fathered, or watch 2 kingdoms burn in a war that would consume thousands. But what she didn't know was that the peasant had already vanished into the night, taking with her the only heir to his throne. Will Kieran choose duty or love? Can Luna survive on her own with a royal child? What price will their love ultimately demand? Chapter 1. The Weight of Duty. King Kieran of Valdris stood before the towering windows of his throne room, his hands clasped behind his back, as he watched the morning mist roll across the castle grounds. The weight of his crown felt heavier today, pressing down upon his dark hair like the expectations of an entire kingdom. At 28, he had ruled for nearly a decade, yet the burden of leadership had never felt more suffocating. "Your Majesty," came the familiar voice of his chief advisor, Darius. The older man's footsteps echoed against the stone floor as he approached with measured steps. "The council awaits your presence. Princess Celeste's father grows impatient for your formal announcement." Kieran's jaw tightened at the mention of his betrothed. Princess Celeste of Ravencrest. Beautiful, accomplished, politically advantageous. Everything a queen should be, yet the thought of binding himself to her felt like signing his own death warrant. His fingers unconsciously moved to the silver pendant hidden beneath his royal tunic, the wolf seal warm against his chest. "Tell me, Darius," Kieran said without turning from the window, "what makes a man worthy of a crown?" The advisor paused, clearly caught off guard by the philosophical nature of the question. "Duty, Your Majesty. The willingness to place the kingdom before self. And what of happiness? What of love?" "Luxuries that common men may afford, my lord. Kings must think of bloodlines, alliances, the greater good." Kieran finally turned, his storm-gray eyes reflecting a pain he dared not voice. The greater good. How many times had those words been used to cage his heart? He had been groomed since birth to understand that his personal desires were secondary to the needs of Valdris. Marriage was about treaties, not tenderness. Children were heirs, not expressions of love. Yet somewhere in a village he had visited in disguise over a year ago, there lived a woman whose laughter had made him forget he was a king. Luna. Even her name was poetry to his tormented soul. "Schedule the announcement for next week," Kieran commanded, his voice steady despite the rebellion brewing in his chest. "But first, I want reports on the outer villages. Ensure all our citizens are accounted for." Darius bowed. "Of course, Your Majesty. Shall I dispatch additional patrols?" "Yes. Captain Orion is to lead them personally. Tell him to be thorough." As his advisor departed, Kieran returned to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Perhaps if he searched long enough, he might find not just Luna, but the man he used to be before duty turned his heart to stone. Chapter 2. Echoes of a Dream. Sleep had become Kieran's enemy. Each night brought the same torment, dreams so vivid they felt like memories, so beautiful they broke his heart upon waking. Tonight was no different as he jolted upright in his massive 4-poster bed, sweat beading his brow, his hand reaching instinctively for the empty space beside him. In his dream, Luna had been there again, her golden hair spread across his pillow like spun sunlight, her blue eyes warm with love and trust. He could still feel the phantom touch of her fingers tracing the scars on his chest, and could still hear her whispered words of affection. But most painful of all was the memory of her believing he was merely Santiago, a traveling merchant who had stolen her heart during 3 perfect nights. Kieran rose from his bed, his naked form silhouetted against the dying embers in the fireplace. The pendant caught the faint light as he lifted it, studying the intricate wolf design his mother had worn before her death. He had left it with Luna as a promise he had been too cowardly to keep. A soft knock interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he called, hastily pulling on a robe. "Your Majesty," a servant girl curtsied, her eyes carefully averted. "A messenger has brought correspondence from Princess Celeste." The sealed letter sat upon a silver tray, the raven crest rose emblazoned in crimson wax. Kieran stared at it for a long moment before moving to the fireplace. Without breaking the seal, he consigned the letter to the flames, watching as Celeste's words, whatever they might have been, turned to ash. "Tell the messenger the king was indisposed," he instructed the servant, who hurried away with wide eyes. Alone again, Kieran moved to his private balcony, the cool night air sharp against his skin. The kingdom spread below him like a tapestry of shadows and moonlight. Somewhere out there, Luna might be sleeping, perhaps dreaming of the merchant who had vanished from her life without explanation. Did she hate him? Did she wonder why Santiago had promised to return and never did? The worst possibility haunted him most, that she had forgotten him entirely, moved on with her life as he should have done. But forgetting Luna was like trying to forget how to breathe. She had seen past his careful masks to the man beneath, had loved Santiago with a purity that had shattered every defense he possessed. A wolf howled in the distant forest, and Kieran felt an answering call deep in his chest. He was alpha to his people, king by birthright and conquest, yet he felt more lost than any lone wolf wandering the wilderness. Tomorrow would bring more council meetings, more pressure to formalize his engagement, more steps toward a future that felt like a gilded prison. But tonight he would hold on to his dreams of Luna, even if they were slowly killing him. Chapter 3. The search begins. The great hall buzzed with tension as Kieran took his place upon the throne, the carved wolves at his shoulders seeming to snarl at the assembled nobles. Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing their king's dark mood despite his composed exterior. Princess Celeste's ambassador sat rigid with displeasure, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Your Majesty." Lord Chancellor Marcus began, his voice carefully measured. "We cannot delay the formal betrothal announcement indefinitely. The Ravencrest delegation grows suspicious of our hesitation." Kieran's fingers drummed against the throne's armrest, the only sign of his inner turmoil. "And what of our duty to ensure the welfare of all citizens within our borders? How can we celebrate royal unions while our outer villages remain unaccounted for?" The excuse tasted bitter on his tongue, but it served his purpose. Several council members exchanged glances, clearly confused by their Alpha King's sudden interest in census matters that had never concerned him before. "Perhaps we might discuss practical matters," Ambassador Dante interjected, his tone sharp with barely concealed irritation. "Princess Celeste grows concerned by the lack of correspondence from your Majesty. 3 letters have gone unanswered." "The Alpha King has been occupied with pressing matters of state," Darius smoothly intervened, shooting Kieran a meaningful look. "Surely Princess Celeste understands the demands of rulership." Kieran rose abruptly, his dark cloak swirling around his imposing frame. "Captain Orion, attend me." The captain stepped forward, his weathered face curious but alert. Orion had served the crown faithfully for 15 years, leading countless patrols and missions with unwavering loyalty. If anyone could find Luna, it would be him. "Extend patrols to the southeastern villages," Kieran commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "I want detailed reports on every settlement, every family. Pay particular attention to displaced persons who might require royal assistance." Orion's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing undercurrents he didn't fully understand. "Any specific threats we should investigate, Your Majesty?" "Threats to the crown come in many forms, Captain. Ensure no citizen falls through the cracks of our protection." As the council session dissolved into murmurs of confusion and concern, Kieran strode from the hall, leaving behind a wake of speculation. In his private study, he spread maps across his desk, tracing the roads that led to Luna's village with trembling fingers. He remembered every detail of that festival night, the dancing flames, the music, the way Luna had looked at Santiago with wonder and desire. She had been so trusting, so open with her heart, and he had taken that gift and vanished like morning mist, leaving her with nothing but memories and his mother's pendant. The pendant that might be the key to finding her again. A soft knock drew his attention. "Enter." Darius stepped inside, his expression troubled. "Your Majesty, forgive my boldness, but this sudden interest in village censuses. The council speaks of nothing else. They wonder if perhaps the pressure of the approaching nuptials might be affecting your judgment." Kieran looked up from the maps, his gray eyes cold as winter storms. "My judgment has never been clearer, old friend. Sometimes a king must attend to matters that others deem insignificant. And what of Princess Celeste? What shall I tell her father's ambassador?" "Tell him the King of Valdris bows to no timeline but his own." Chapter 4. Ghosts in Royal Halls. The castle corridors felt like a maze of memories as Kieran walked through them in the early hours before dawn. Sleep had once again eluded him, and restless energy drove him from his chambers like a man possessed. Every tapestry, every portrait of his ancestors seemed to mock him with their silent judgment. Kings who had done their duty, married for the good of the realm, produced heirs without the complication of love. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallways as he made his way to the portrait gallery, drawn by a masochistic need to confront his lineage. The painted faces stared down at him with expressions ranging from stern disapproval to regal indifference. His father, King Alderon I, dominated the far wall, a man who had ruled with an iron fist and had never once mentioned love in any conversation about duty. "You would be ashamed of me," Kieran whispered to the painted figure. "Your son, the king, pining for a village maiden like some lovesick boy." But even as he spoke the words, rebellion flared in his chest. His father had married for duty and spent his life in cold solitude, respected but never truly happy. Was that the legacy Kieran wanted to perpetuate? A crown passed down through generations of men who sacrificed their hearts for political gain? "Your Majesty?" a tentative voice called from the gallery entrance. Kieran turned to find Xavier, one of his younger guards, looking uncertain about interrupting the king's solitary brooding. "What is it?" "Captain Orion requests an audience, sire. He says it's urgent." Kieran's pulse quickened. Had they found something already? "Send him to my private study immediately." Minutes later, Orion stood before Kieran's desk, his expression carefully neutral. The captain was an experienced soldier who had learned to read the moods of kings, and right now he sensed dangerous undercurrents at his monarch's request. "Report," Kieran commanded, struggling to keep his voice level. "The southeastern villages show no signs of immediate threat, Your Majesty. However, there are unusual circumstances in some settlements. Families disrupted, young women who have disappeared from their homes under questionable circumstances." Kieran's hands clenched into fists. "Explain." "In the village of Millhaven, Lord Thornwick recently cast out his daughter for bearing a child out of wedlock. The villagers speak of it in whispers. Apparently, she vanished one night with the babe, and no one has seen her since." The world seemed to tilt around Kieran. Luna's father was Lord Thornwick of Millhaven. The description matched perfectly, and the timing. His mind raced with calculations. 9 months after their 3 nights together would place the birth right around now. This daughter, Kieran managed, his voice hoarse. What was her name? Orion consulted his notes. "Luna, Your Majesty. Golden-haired, they said. Known for her kindness and beauty. The child was a boy." Kieran gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles went white. A son. Luna had borne him a son and suffered exile because of it. The woman who had given him 3 nights of pure love had paid the ultimate price for his cowardice. "Continue the search," Kieran ordered, fighting to keep his expression neutral. "Expand the patrols. I want every abandoned cottage, every forest shelter investigated. This displaced woman and her child must be found and offered royal protection." Of course, Your Majesty. Though I should mention, the trail grows cold quickly in forest terrain. If she's been hiding for weeks, finding her may prove challenging. Then we search harder, Kieran snarled, his composure finally cracking. Use every resource at our disposal. Find her. After Orion departed, Kieran collapsed into his chair, the weight of revelation crushing down upon him. Luna was out there somewhere, alone and afraid, protecting their child, their son. While he sat in his palace, she was probably cold, hungry, desperate. And it was entirely his fault. Chapter 5. The Discovery. 3 days of relentless searching had yielded nothing but frustration and growing desperation. Kieran paced his study like a caged wolf, maps and reports scattered across every surface as he obsessively tracked each patrol route. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally immaculate appearance had grown haggard from sleepless nights and endless worry. The council meeting that afternoon had been a disaster. Ambassador Dante had delivered Princess Celeste's ultimatum with barely concealed satisfaction: announce the formal betrothal within the fortnight or consider the alliance permanently severed. The threat of losing Ravencrest's military support should neighboring kingdoms decide to test Valdris's strength hung heavy in the air. But Kieran barely heard the political machinations. His entire being was focused on one thing: finding Luna and their child. A sharp knock interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he called, not looking up from the map he'd been staring at for the past hour. "Your Majesty." Orion's voice carried an urgency that made Kieran's head snap up instantly. The captain's weathered face was flushed from hard riding, and his eyes held a light that made Kieran's heart pound. "Report," Kieran demanded, rising from his chair. "We found her, Your Majesty." Orion's words hit like lightning. A cottage in Darkwood Forest, 3 leagues northeast of Millhaven. The woman and child matched the descriptions perfectly. Kieran's legs nearly gave out. His hands braced against the desk as the room seemed to spin around him. "Are you certain?" "The child has eyes like winter storms, Your Majesty. And the woman—" Orion hesitated, clearly struggling with some emotion. "She bore a pendant with the royal wolf seal." The pendant. His mother's pendant. The one he'd left on Luna's pillow as a promise he'd been too cowardly to keep. She still wore it, still carried that token of his love even after everything she'd endured. "Their condition?" Kieran asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alive, but the woman is thin, exhausted. She's been surviving on very little, clearly struggling to care for the babe alone. When we approached, she—" Orion's voice softened. "She protected the child with her life, Your Majesty. Placed herself between our soldiers and the boy without hesitation." Pride and anguish warred in Kieran's chest. Of course Luna would be fierce in protecting their son. She had always possessed a quiet strength that belied her gentle nature. "Where are they now?" Kieran demanded. "I took the liberty of bringing them to the castle, Your Majesty. They're housed in the Rose Tower under guard for their protection." The woman seemed confused by the royal treatment. "She believes she's been arrested." Kieran was already moving toward the door. "Have food sent to their chambers immediately, the finest the kitchens can provide, and send for the court physician. I want them both examined thoroughly." "Your Majesty," Orion called after him, "there's one more thing. The woman, she doesn't know who you are. When we mentioned bringing her before the king, she asked why royalty would concern themselves with a displaced peasant." Kieran stopped in his tracks. Luna didn't know Santiago was the king. In her mind, she had loved a traveling merchant who had disappeared from her life, and now she faced judgment from a monarch who was a complete stranger. The irony was both heartbreaking and terrifying. How could he face her? How could he look into those trusting blue eyes and reveal the depth of his deception? She would hate him for lying, for abandoning her, for letting her suffer while he lived in luxury. But regardless of her reaction, he had to try. He had to see his son, had to somehow make amends for the damage his cowardice had caused. Taking a deep breath, Kieran straightened his shoulders and headed for the Rose Tower where his heart and his redemption waited. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. Kieran stood outside the Rose Tower chamber for nearly 10 minutes, his hand raised to knock but frozen by a combination of anticipation and terror. Behind this door waited the woman he had never stopped loving, and the child he had never known existed. The weight of his deception felt crushing, yet the need to see them overwhelmed every other consideration. Finally, he knocked softly. "My lady, I am Xavier, advisor to His Majesty. Might I enter?" The lie came easily, too easily. But revealing his true identity immediately seemed like cruelty. She needed time to adjust to her new circumstances before learning that the king who had summoned her was the same man who had abandoned her. "Enter," came a voice that sent lightning through his veins. Luna's voice, cautious but strong. Kieran opened the door and stepped inside, every carefully rehearsed word dying in his throat. There she was, thinner than before, her golden hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a simple dress provided by the castle servants. But it was her eyes that stopped his heart. Those same blue eyes that had looked at Santiago with such love and trust now regarded him with wariness and confusion. In her arms was a baby with dark hair and unmistakably familiar gray eyes. His son. Their son. "My lady," Kieran managed, bowing slightly. "I am Xavier. His Majesty sent me to ensure your comfort and to understand your circumstances." Luna studied him carefully, and Kieran felt exposed under her scrutiny. Could she sense something familiar about him? Did some part of her recognize the man she had loved? "Why would the king concern himself with us?" she asked, unconsciously holding their son closer. "We're nobody important. Just displaced persons seeking shelter. His Majesty is known for his compassion toward those in need," Kieran replied, the words tasting like ash. Compassion. If only she knew how long he had searched, how desperately he had needed to find her. "And what does he want in return?" Luna's voice carried a bitter edge that cut through him. "In my experience, powerful men always want something." Kieran moved closer, drawn by the magnetic pull that had always existed between them. As he approached, the baby's eyes fixed on him with an intensity that was startling in one so young. Those gray eyes, his eyes, seemed to look right through him. "May I?" Kieran gestured toward the child, his voice catching. Luna hesitated, then slowly extended their son toward him. The moment the baby was in his arms, Kieran felt something fundamental shift in his soul. This tiny being was part of him, part of Luna, a living symbol of the love they had shared. The child's small hand grasped his finger with surprising strength, and Kieran had to fight back tears. "He's beautiful," Kieran whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "What do you call him?" "I named him Aiden," Luna replied, watching the interaction with growing confusion. "It means little fire. He has a strong spirit." "Aiden," Kieran repeated, testing the name. It suited the boy perfectly. "And his father?" Pain flashed across Luna's features. "Gone. He was a traveling merchant. He left before he knew about the baby." The accusation in her voice was clear, even if she didn't know she was speaking directly to the man who had caused her such pain. Kieran wanted to explain, to fall to his knees and beg her forgiveness, to tell her that leaving her had nearly destroyed him. But the words wouldn't come. "Perhaps he had reasons," Kieran said carefully. "Perhaps he never intended to cause harm." "Intentions matter little when you're cast out by your own father and left to survive in the wilderness," Luna replied sharply. Then her expression softened as she looked at their son. "But I don't regret anything. Aiden is worth every hardship." As Kieran held his son and watched Luna's fierce maternal love, he realized that winning her back would be the greatest battle of his life, and he wasn't sure he deserved to win. Chapter 7. Playing a role over the next several days, Kieran fell into a routine that was both heaven and hell. Each morning, he would visit Luna's chambers as Xavier, bringing news from the king and ensuring her comfort, Each evening, he would retreat to his own rooms and agonize over the deception that grew more complex with every passing hour. Luna was slowly beginning to trust him, and that trust was agony. She spoke freely about her fears for Aiden's future, her gratitude for the king's unexpected kindness, and occasionally, most painfully, about Santiago, the mysterious merchant who had stolen her heart and vanished. He was different, she confided one afternoon, as Kieran played with Aiden on a blanket by the window. Not like the lords and merchants who usually came through our village. There was something noble about him, despite his simple clothes. Kieran's hands stilled on the wooden toy he'd been showing their son. How so? The way he carried himself, the way he spoke to people, servants, nobles, children, all with the same respect. And his hands— Luna blushed, clearly remembering intimate moments. They were soft in some places, calloused in others, like someone who had known both luxury and hard work. Perhaps he was more than he seemed, Kieran suggested carefully. Perhaps. Luna's voice grew sad. I used to imagine he was a displaced prince or a knight in disguise playing at being common. Foolish, romantic notions. If only she knew how close to the truth those notions were. Aiden had begun to show a marked preference for Kieran's company, reaching for him whenever he entered the room and settling more easily in his arms than anyone else's. Luna noticed, but seemed to attribute it to Kieran's natural way with children, rather than any deeper connection. You would make a good father, she observed one day, watching as Kieran helped Aiden take his first tentative steps between the furniture. I hope so, Kieran replied, his heart breaking at the irony. He was already a father, but she didn't know it. Every moment with his son felt stolen, borrowed time before the inevitable revelation that might destroy everything. The political situation was deteriorating rapidly. Ambassador Dante had delivered increasingly threatening messages from Princess Celeste's father, and the council was growing openly hostile about Kieran's continued delays. Darius had begun to suspect something was amiss with the king's frequent disappearances and distracted demeanor. The council grows restless, Kieran told Luna one evening, maintaining his role as the king's advisor. There are pressures regarding His Majesty's marriage arrangements. He's to be married? Luna asked, and Kieran thought he detected something odd in her tone. It's a political alliance. Princess Celeste of Ravencrest. The marriage has been planned for years. And does he love her? The question seemed casual, but Luna's eyes were intent. I believe His Majesty struggles with matters of the heart, Kieran replied truthfully. Duty and desire rarely align for those who wear crowns. How sad, Luna murmured, and Kieran wasn't sure if she was thinking of the king or of Santiago. That night, as Kieran sat alone in his chambers, he realized his deception was becoming unsustainable. Luna was beginning to settle into castle life, and there were moments when he caught her looking at him with a puzzled expression, as if something was familiar but she couldn't quite place it. Soon, she would recognize him, or someone else would inadvertently reveal his identity. But more importantly, he was falling deeper in love with both Luna and Aiden every day. Watching Luna read to their son, seeing her gentle strength as she navigated the complexities of court life, witnessing the fierce protection she showed whenever anyone approached Aiden too closely. All of it made him more certain that she was the only woman he could ever love. The question was whether she could ever forgive Santiago for his lies, and whether she could ever love a king who had deceived her so completely. Chapter 8: Unwelcome Arrivals. The morning began like any other, with Kieran making his way to Luna's chambers under the guise of his daily advisory visit. But as he approached the Rose Tower, the sound of multiple carriages and the sharp commands of guards told him something was very wrong. His blood turned to ice as he recognized the banners snapping in the morning breeze, the crimson rose of Ravencrest. Princess Celeste had arrived unannounced. Kieran quickly changed direction, racing toward the main courtyard where a magnificent procession was drawing to a halt. Princess Celeste emerged from the lead carriage like a vision of royal perfection. Tall, elegant, with auburn hair and green eyes that missed nothing, She was beautiful in the way that political marriages demanded, every inch the queen that Valdris needed. And seeing her now, with Luna just a tower away, Kieran felt trapped between two worlds that could never coexist. "Your Majesty," Celeste called, her voice carrying just the right note of affectionate reproach. "How disappointing that my betrothed was not here to greet me personally." Kieran forced himself to approach, to play the role of the courtly king while his heart hammered against his ribs. "Princess Celeste, your unexpected arrival finds us unprepared for a proper ceremony." Unexpected? Celeste's smile was sharp as a blade. "My father sent 3 messengers announcing my visit. Perhaps your Majesty has been too occupied with local affairs to notice royal correspondence?" The barb hit its mark. Kieran was acutely aware of the servants and courtiers witnessing this exchange, how his apparent neglect of his betrothed must appear to those who valued political stability above all else. "Of course," Kieran replied smoothly. "We shall host a feast tonight in your honor. I trust your journey was pleasant?" "Tedious," Celeste replied, allowing him to escort her toward the castle. "But perhaps the entertainment here will prove more engaging than my father's court." As they walked, Kieran's mind raced with the implications of her presence. Luna's chambers were in clear view of the main castle gardens, where Celeste would likely spend her days. There would be formal introductions, court presentations, endless opportunities for the two women to encounter each other. And when Celeste inevitably learned about the mysterious woman and child residing in the Rose Tower, "I'm eager to meet your household," Celeste continued, her voice casual but her eyes alert. "I understand there have been some interesting additions to your court recently." Kieran's step faltered. How could she already know about Luna? "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, just rumors," Celeste replied with false lightness. "Something about displaced villagers being granted unusual royal protection. I find myself curious about His Majesty's charitable impulses." They had reached the castle steps, where Darius waited with the other advisors, their faces carefully neutral but their concern obvious. The next few hours would be crucial. Kieran needed to control the situation, to keep Luna and Celeste from crossing paths until he could figure out how to navigate this political and personal minefield. "Darius," Kieran commanded, "see that Princess Celeste is given the finest chambers in the West Wing, and arrange for a tour of the gardens. I believe she would enjoy seeing our autumn roses." "Of course, Your Majesty," Darius replied, though his eyes held questions that would need answers soon. As Celeste was escorted away, Kieran caught sight of a familiar figure in one of the Rose Tower windows. Luna stood there with Aiden in her arms, looking down at the courtyard with obvious curiosity about the grand arrival. For a moment their eyes met across the distance, and Kieran felt the familiar jolt of connection that always passed between them. But then he saw Celeste glance back, following his gaze to the tower window, her sharp mind already calculating the significance of his distracted attention. The game had become infinitely more dangerous, and Kieran wasn't sure he could protect everyone he loved from the consequences of his choices. Mara Chapter 9. Dangerous Games. The evening feast was an exercise in torture disguised as royal entertainment. Kieran sat at the high table with Princess Celeste at his right, playing the part of an attentive betrothed, while his thoughts remained entirely focused on Luna and Aiden, safely sequestered in the Rose Tower. Every smile he forced for Celeste's benefit felt like a betrayal of the woman he truly loved. "You seem distracted tonight, Your Majesty," Celeste observed, her voice pitched for his ears alone while maintaining her radiant public smile. "I do hope the affairs of state haven't become too burdensome." "Merely ensuring all aspects of the kingdom receive proper attention," Kieran replied carefully. "There are many demands on a king's time." "Indeed." Celeste's green eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement or calculation. "I understand you've taken a personal interest in certain charitable cases recently. How admirably compassionate of you." Kieran's goblet paused halfway to his lips. The way she emphasized certain words carried clear implications, and her smile had taken on a predatory edge that set every instinct on high alert. "The crown has always protected those in need," he said neutrally. "Of course, though I confess curiosity about what makes certain cases warrant such direct royal attention. Personal intervention from the king himself is rather unusual, isn't it?" Before Kieran could respond, Darius appeared at his shoulder, leaning down to whisper urgent words that made Kieran's blood freeze. "Your Majesty, there's been a situation. The lady in the Rose Tower attempted to leave the castle grounds with her child. She was gently deterred by the guards, but she's quite distressed." Kieran's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Luna had tried to flee. Why? Had she somehow learned of Celeste's arrival and feared for her safety? Or had she simply grown tired of feeling like a gilded prisoner? "Excuse me," Kieran said, rising abruptly. "I must attend to an urgent matter." "Surely it can wait until morning." Celeste's voice carried a sharp edge now. "It would be rather rude to abandon your betrothed on her first evening in your castle." The challenge was clear, delivered in front of the entire court. Kieran was trapped between his duty as a host and his desperate need to ensure Luna's well-being. Every eye in the great hall watched his decision, measuring his priorities. "Forgive me," Kieran said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "But some matters require immediate attention. I trust you understand that a king's duties never cease." Without waiting for her response, he strode from the hall, leaving behind a buzz of speculation and one very angry princess. Kieran reached the Rose Tower to find Luna pacing frantically in her chambers, Aiden crying in his cradle while she wrung her hands in distress. She whirled when he entered, her eyes bright with unshed tears and something that might have been desperation. "Xavier?" she breathed, and the relief in her voice cut through him. "Thank God. They wouldn't let me leave. The guard said I needed the king's permission to depart the castle grounds. Permission! As if I were a prisoner." "My lady, please," Kieran said, moving toward her slowly. "No one meant to frighten you. The king only wishes to ensure your safety." "Safety?" Luna laughed bitterly. "I've seen the banners, heard the servants talking. Princess Celeste has arrived for the royal wedding announcement. Do you think I'm so naive that I don't understand what that means? What happens to the inconvenient peasant woman and her bastard child when the future queen takes her place?" Kieran felt something crack inside his chest. She wasn't just afraid. She was protecting their son from a threat she didn't even fully understand. And she was right to be afraid. Political marriages left no room for inconvenient truths or displaced lovers. "The king would never allow harm to come to you or Aiden," Kieran said, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't contain. "How can you be so certain?" Luna demanded. "What am I to him? What are we to anyone? Just reminders of charity that might prove embarrassing when real royalty arrives." Before Kieran could answer, a new voice cut through the tension like a blade. "An excellent question." Both Kieran and Luna spun toward the door, where Princess Celeste stood with 2 guards, her beautiful face a mask of cold curiosity. She had followed him. She had seen him rush to Luna's aid, abandoning his royal duties for a peasant woman's distress. And from the calculating gleam in her eyes, Kieran knew that everything was about to change. Chapter 10. The Truth Unveiled. The silence in the chamber stretched like a taut wire, threatening to snap under the weight of unspoken truths. Princess Celeste entered with the fluid grace of a predator, her keen eyes taking in every detail. Luna's protective stance over Aiden's cradle, Kieran's obvious distress, the intimate familiarity that existed between the supposed advisor and the displaced peasant woman. "How fascinating," Celeste murmured, her voice silk over steel. "Xavier, isn't it? You seem remarkably invested in this particular case of royal charity." Kieran's mind raced, searching for words that might deflect her suspicions, but Luna stepped forward before he could speak. "Your Highness," Luna said, dropping into a deep curtsy despite her obvious fear. "Forgive the disturbance. I was merely confused about the protocols. I meant no disrespect." "Rise," Celeste commanded, studying Luna with the intensity of a scholar examining a rare manuscript. "You're quite beautiful, aren't you? I can see why you might attract attention." The implication in her words was clear, and Kieran felt rage building in his chest. But before he could intervene, Celeste moved closer to Aiden's cradle, her expression shifting to one of genuine curiosity. "And this must be the child everyone whispers about," she said, leaning down to examine the baby. "Such unusual eyes for a peasant child, almost aristocratic in their—" Celeste stopped mid-sentence, her face going pale. Her gaze snapped from Aiden to Kieran, then back to the child, understanding dawning like a terrible sunrise. "Those eyes," she whispered, her composure finally cracking. "I know those eyes." Luna looked between them in confusion, clearly sensing the undercurrents, but not understanding their source. Kieran felt the walls of his deception crumbling around him, each second bringing him closer to a revelation that might destroy everything. "Your Highness?" Kieran began, but Celeste cut him off with a laugh that held no humor. "Oh, this is rich," she said, her voice rising with hysteria masked as amusement. "Xavier, the devoted advisor, rushing to comfort a peasant woman. Tell me, Xavier, do you often abandon royal duties for charitable work?" She stepped closer to Kieran, her green eyes blazing with fury and something that might have been betrayal. "Or perhaps you should explain why this peasant child bears the unmistakable gray eyes of the House of Valdris." Luna gasped, her gaze flying to Kieran's face with growing horror. He watched as understanding crashed over her like a wave, saw the moment she recognized Santiago as the king's advisor, saw her world shatter as comprehensively as his own. "No," Luna whispered, backing away from him. "No, you can't be. Xavier isn't—" "Allow me to properly introduce myself, my dear," Celeste said with vicious satisfaction. "You've been speaking with King Kieran of Valdris, my betrothed, the father of your bastard child." The words hit Luna like physical blows. She stumbled backward, her face drained of all color, her hand pressed to her heart as if she could physically hold the broken pieces together. "Santiago," she breathed, and hearing his false name from her lips in this context made Kieran feel like the worst kind of monster. "Luna, please," Kieran said, stepping toward her, but she flinched away from his touch as if he were poisonous. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everything was a lie. You're the king. You're engaged. You left me pregnant and alone while you— She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the magnitude of his betrayal. Tears streamed down her face as she scooped Aiden from his cradle, holding him like a shield against further harm. "How long have you known?" she demanded, her voice gaining strength through fury. "How long have you been playing with me, pretending to be Xavier while knowing exactly who I was, what you had done to me?" "Luna, let me explain." "Explain?" She laughed bitterly. "What's to explain? You seduced me, abandoned me, let me suffer exile and starvation while you planned your royal wedding, and then, when your conscience finally stirred, you had me brought here like some kept women to be hidden away while you played at being kind." Celeste watched the drama unfold with obvious fascination, clearly calculating how this scandal might be used to her advantage. But Kieran only had eyes for Luna, for the devastating pain he had caused the woman he loved more than his own life. "It wasn't like that," he said desperately. "I searched for you. I never stopped thinking about you. When I found out about Aiden—" "Get out," Luna said, her voice deadly quiet. "Both of you. Leave us alone." "Luna! Get out!" Her scream echoed off the stone walls, and Aiden began to cry, adding to the chaos of the moment. Kieran felt his heart break completely as he looked at the woman he loved, holding his son, both of them lost to him through his own cowardice and deception. As he turned to leave, Celeste's voice followed him. "Well, Your Majesty," she said sweetly, "this should make for interesting negotiations regarding our marriage contract." Chapter 11. Consequences of Truth. Kieran stood in his private chambers like a man awaiting execution, staring out at the Rose Tower where Luna and Aiden remained sequestered behind closed doors. She had refused all visitors since the devastating revelation 12 hours ago, even declining the meals sent by worried servants. The knowledge that she was likely crying herself sick while he stood helpless in his golden cage was slowly driving him mad. A sharp knock interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he called, not turning from the window. "Your Majesty." Darius's voice carried a weight that spoke of impending disaster. "The Council requests your immediate presence. Princess Celeste has shared certain information that requires urgent discussion." Of course she had. Kieran closed his eyes, steeling himself for the political tsunami that was about to break over his head. Celeste was too shrewd to keep Luna's existence secret when it could be weaponized for her own purposes. The council chamber buzzed with barely contained chaos when Kieran entered. Princess Celeste sat in the place of honor, her expression serene despite the storm she had clearly unleashed. The assembled lords wore expressions ranging from shock to outrage to calculating speculation. "Your Majesty," Lord Chancellor Marcus began, his voice tight with controlled fury. "We have been informed of certain irregularities that demand immediate clarification. Princess Celeste has graciously shared some disturbing intelligence," added Lord Garrett, one of Celeste's strongest supporters. "Allegations that you have been keeping a peasant mistress and her bastard child within the castle walls." Kieran took his place at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral despite the storm raging in his chest. "I have provided sanctuary to a displaced woman and her child. This is hardly an unprecedented royal charity." "Charity?" Celeste's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Is that what we're calling it when the child in question bears the unmistakable features of House Valdris?" The silence that followed was deafening. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for such a direct accusation. Others leaned forward with predatory interest, sensing opportunity in royal scandal. "Furthermore," Celeste continued with devastating calm, "this woman appears to be someone with whom His Majesty had previous acquaintance. The nature of their relationship when he visited her village in disguise over a year ago raises serious questions about the king's judgment and fitness to rule." Darius's face had gone ashen. "Your Majesty, surely these allegations are true," Kieran interrupted, his voice carrying across the chamber with absolute authority. "Every word." The explosion of voices that followed was immediate and chaotic. Accusations flew, demands for explanations, threats of withdrawal of support. Through it all, Kieran sat in silence, watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. "Silence," he finally roared, his alpha authority cutting through the noise like a physical force. The room fell quiet instantly, all eyes fixed on their king. "You want the truth?" Kieran stood, his imposing frame commanding attention. "Yes, I have a son. Yes, his mother suffered because of my cowardice in not claiming them both immediately. Yes, I have been deceiving this council, my betrothed and myself about where my heart truly lies." Princess Celeste's composed mask finally cracked, revealing the fury beneath. "And what of our engagement? What of the alliance between our kingdoms? Did you think to simply ignore your obligations while playing house with your peasant whore?" The last word hit Kieran like a physical blow. In one fluid motion, he was around the table, his hand slamming down inches from Celeste's face, his eyes blazing with protective rage. "You will never," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "speak of Lady Luna in such terms again. She is the mother of my heir, and she will be treated with the respect that position demands." "Lady Luna?" Lord Marcus sputtered. "Your Majesty, you cannot seriously be suggesting—" "I am suggesting nothing," Kieran replied, straightening to his full height. "I am declaring my intention to make Luna my queen and legitimize my son as my heir." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Celeste seemed struck speechless by the boldness of his declaration. "This is madness," Lord Garrett finally whispered. "The alliance with Ravencrest will have to be renegotiated," Kieran finished, "or dissolved entirely if Princess Celeste cannot accept the new reality." All eyes turned to Celeste, who sat rigid with fury and humiliation. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice over steel. "My father will consider this a declaration of war, Your Majesty. Break our engagement for a base-born woman and you'll face the consequences alone." "So be it," Kieran replied without hesitation. "Some things are worth fighting for." As the council erupted into chaos once again, Kieran strode from the chamber, his course finally set. He had chosen Luna and Aiden over political convenience, love over duty. Now he just had to convince Luna to forgive him enough to let him try to earn back her love. But first, he had to survive the political catastrophe he had just unleashed. Chapter 12. A Kingdom Divided. The Great Hall of Valdris had never felt so much like a battleground. Word of the king's shocking declaration had spread through the castle like wildfire, and by morning, clear lines had been drawn between those who supported Kieran's right to choose his queen and those who viewed his decision as catastrophic folly. Kieran sat upon his throne, outwardly composed, but inwardly reeling from the magnitude of what he had unleashed. Princess Celeste had departed at dawn with half the court in tow, her final words echoing through the chamber like a death sentence. "My father's armies will be at your borders within the month, Your Majesty. I hope your peasant queen proves worth the price you'll pay for her." Now, barely a dozen lords remained in the hall, their faces grim as they contemplated the political and military crisis bearing down upon their kingdom. Darius stood at Kieran's right hand, his expression carefully neutral despite the obvious concern in his eyes. "Your Majesty," Lord Aiden spoke first, his voice heavy with resignation. "I've served your family for 30 years, through war and peace, but I cannot support a decision that threatens the very survival of our kingdom." "And what would you have me do?" Kieran asked, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Abandon the mother of my child? Pretend my son doesn't exist to preserve a political alliance built on lies?" "I would have you be a king first and a man second," Lord Marcus replied harshly, "as your father was, as his father before him. Personal desires are luxuries that rulers cannot afford." "My father," Kieran said slowly, "died alone and bitter, surrounded by subjects who respected him but loved him not at all. Is that the legacy you would have me embrace?" Before anyone could answer, the great doors burst open. Captain Orion strode in, his face flushed from hard riding, his armor dusty from the road. "Your Majesty," he called, not bothering with formal courtesies. "Urgent news from the northern borders." Kieran leaned forward in his throne. "Report." 3 separate scout parties have sighted Ravencrest banners moving toward our territory. They're not waiting for formal declarations. Princess Celeste's father is mobilizing for war immediately. The remaining lords exchanged dark looks, their worst fears confirmed. Lord Garrett stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. "Your Majesty, it's not too late. Send an envoy to Princess Celeste. Apologize for the misunderstanding. Agree to send the woman and child away quietly and perhaps—" "No." Kieran's voice cut through the suggestion like a blade. "I will not abandon my family again. Not for politics, not for convenience, not even to prevent war." "Then you'll doom us all for the sake of one woman's honor," Lord Marcus said bitterly. "I'll fight for what's right," Kieran corrected, "something I should have done from the beginning." As the lords filed out in various states of disgust and resignation, Kieran found himself essentially alone with Darius and Orion. The weight of his choices pressed down upon him like a physical force, but beneath the fear and uncertainty, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine peace with his decisions. "How long do we have?" he asked Orion. 2 weeks, perhaps 3 before they reach our borders in force. Their advanced scouts are already probing our defenses," And our military strength? We can muster perhaps half their numbers, Orion replied honestly. The lords who've withdrawn their support have taken their house guards with them. We're not defenseless, but we're significantly outmatched, Kieran finished. I understand. Your Majesty, Darius spoke for the first time since the morning's confrontation. There might be another way. The woman, Luna, she doesn't know of your declaration yet. If she were to refuse your proposal, reject the crown, it might provide face-saving options for all parties. Kieran's hands clenched on the arms of his throne. The suggestion was logical, politically sound, and absolutely horrifying. Send someone else to convince Luna that she didn't want to be queen, that she should take Aiden and disappear to save the kingdom from war. It would solve every problem except the one that mattered most to him. No, he said again, his voice carrying absolute finality. I've lied to her enough. I've caused her enough pain through my cowardice. Whatever comes next, she deserves the truth and the right to choose her own path. Even if that choice dooms the kingdom? Darius asked quietly. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, staring at the empty hall where his ancestors' banners hung like silent judges. Finally, he spoke. A kingdom that can only survive through the sacrifice of innocence isn't worth preserving. I'll find another way to protect our people, but it won't be by abandoning the woman I love again. As his advisors departed to begin preparations for the coming storm, Kieran remained alone on his throne, gathering courage for the most important conversation of his life. Luna still refused to see him, but that was about to change. Ready or not, they needed to face their future together. Chapter 13. The Ultimatum. Luna stood at the window of her chamber, staring out at the castle grounds where servants scurried about with urgent purpose. Even sequestered in the Rose Tower, she could sense the tension that had gripped the entire fortress. Guards moved with military precision, messengers rode out at all hours, and the very air seemed to hum with approaching crisis. She had refused all visitors since the devastating revelation of Kieran's true identity, surviving on the meager amounts of food she could force herself to eat and the troubled sleep that came between bouts of tears and rage. Aiden seemed to sense her distress, fussing more than usual and requiring constant attention that at least provided distraction from her shattered heart. The soft knock at her door made her stiffen. She had ignored dozens of such interruptions over the past 2 days, but this one was followed by a voice that made her blood run cold. Lady Luna. Princess Celeste's cultured tones carried clearly through the heavy wood. I believe we need to speak. Luna's first instinct was to remain silent, to pretend she wasn't there. But something in Celeste's voice suggested this wasn't a request that could be ignored. Reluctantly, she moved to unlock the door. Celeste entered with regal grace, her traveling clothes impeccable despite the early hour. Her green eyes took in Luna's disheveled appearance, the wrinkled dress, the tear-stained face, the exhaustion that hung around her like a cloak, with something that might have been satisfaction or pity. Your Highness, Luna managed, dropping into a curtsy that felt both appropriate and humiliating. Please sit, Celeste said, settling herself in one of the chamber's chairs as if this were her own receiving room. We have much to discuss, and little time in which to do it. Luna remained standing, unwilling to be at even more of a disadvantage. I can't imagine what we have to discuss. Can't you? Celeste's smile was sharp as winter frost. You're an intelligent woman, Lady Luna. Surely you've noticed the activity in the courtyard, the tension among the servants. Did you think your existence could remain a secret forever? Luna's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean that your former lover, excuse me, His Majesty, has declared his intention to make you his queen. He's broken our engagement, alienated half his council, and brought 2 kingdoms to the brink of war. All for the love of you. The words hit Luna like physical blows. She sank into a chair without conscious thought, her mind reeling. That's impossible. He wouldn't. I told him to leave. I said I never wanted to see him again. And yet he persists in his romantic delusions, Celeste replied coolly. My father's armies are already marching toward your borders. Within a fortnight, hundreds of men will die because your king chose personal desire over political necessity. Luna felt the room spinning around her. War. Men dying. All because of her, because of Aiden, because Kieran had chosen them over his duty. The magnitude of it was overwhelming. I don't want to be queen, Luna whispered. I never asked for any of this. I know, Celeste said, and for the first time her voice held genuine sympathy. You're not the villain in this piece, Lady Luna. You're merely a pawn in a game you never chose to play. But that doesn't mean you can't still influence the outcome. What do you mean? Celeste leaned forward, her expression intent. Convince him to honor his original engagement. Take your child and disappear. There are places you could go, arrangements that could be made, a comfortable life far from the complications of court politics. You're asking me to abandon him, Luna said slowly. I'm asking you to save him, Celeste corrected, and to save countless innocent lives in the process. How many farmers' sons will die for your love affair? How many wives will become widows because the king couldn't control his heart? The guilt crashed over Luna like a tide. Every word Celeste spoke was a knife in her already wounded heart, but they carried the terrible weight of truth. People would die because of her. A kingdom would burn because she had dared to love a king who loved her in return. There's something else you should know, Celeste continued relentlessly. Even if Kieran somehow survives the coming war, even if he manages to make you queen, what kind of life would that be? Half the nobility will never accept you, your children will face constant questions about their legitimacy. You'll spend every day wondering if you're the reason the kingdom suffers. Luna closed her eyes, seeing a future filled with whispers, political intrigue, and the constant knowledge that her presence weakened the man she loved. Was that truly what she wanted for Aiden? To grow up as the bastard prince whose mother had torn a kingdom apart? What would you have me do? Luna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Write a letter, Celeste said, producing parchment and ink from seemingly nowhere. Tell him you want no part of royal life. Take your child and leave before dawn. I'll provide safe passage and enough gold to begin a new life wherever you choose. Luna stared at the blank parchment, her heart breaking all over again. It would be so easy. A few words, and she could free Kieran from the impossible choice between love and duty. She could save the kingdom from war and spare her son a lifetime of political turmoil. All she had to do was walk away from the only man she had ever loved again. I need time to think, Luna said finally. Time is the one thing we lack, Celeste replied, but she rose gracefully. I'll return in 2 hours for your answer. Choose wisely, Lady Luna. The fate of 2 kingdoms hangs in the balance. After Celeste left, Luna sank to the floor beside Aiden's cradle, her tears falling freely as she watched her son sleep. He looked so much like his father, the same strong jaw, the same storm-gray eyes. Would he grow up to hate her for the choice she was about to make? Or would he grow up to hate her for the choice she couldn't make? Chapter 14. The Breaking Point. The 2 hours Princess Celeste had granted felt like both an eternity and an instant. Luna spent the time pacing her chamber like a caged animal, her mind churning through possibilities that all seemed to lead to heartbreak. Every time she looked at Aiden sleeping peacefully in his cradle, she felt the weight of the decision crushing down upon her. She had almost convinced herself to write the letter, had even taken up the quill twice, when another knock came at her door. This time, the voice that followed made her heart nearly stop. Luna, please, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but I need to speak with you. Kieran. Even through the heavy wood, his voice carried all the pain and desperation she felt echoing in her own chest. Despite everything, the lies, the deception, the impossible situation he had created, hearing him so broken nearly undid her resolve. Go away, she called, but her voice lacked conviction. I can't do that. Not when war is coming. Not when you're planning to sacrifice yourself for my mistakes. Luna's blood chilled. How did he know about Celeste's visit? Had the princess told him of her ultimatum, or had servants reported the meeting? Either way, it seemed there were no secrets left between any of them. Luna, please, Kieran continued, and now she could hear tears in his voice. If you're going to leave, if you're going to walk away from everything we could have together, at least let me see our son one more time. Let me hold him and tell him how much his father loves him. The raw pain in his plea shattered the last of Luna's defenses. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door and pulled it open. Kieran stood in the corridor, and the sight of him nearly drove her to her knees. He looked haggard, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, his gray eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and grief. You look terrible, she whispered before she could stop herself. I feel worse, he replied, a ghost of his old smile flickering across his face. May I come in? Luna stepped aside, and Kieran entered the chamber that had become both sanctuary and prison. His eyes immediately went to Aiden's cradle, and the naked longing on his face as he looked at their son was almost unbearable to witness. He's grown, Kieran said softly. Even in just these few days, he seems bigger. Children change quickly at this age, Luna replied, then cursed herself for the casual domesticity of the comment. This wasn't a normal conversation between parents discussing their child's development. Luna, Kieran began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I know what Celeste offered you. Gold, safe passage, a quiet life away from all this madness. And I know it's probably the wise choice. Then why are you here? Luna asked, wrapping her arms around herself as if she could physically hold her breaking heart together. Because I'm a selfish bastard who can't bear the thought of losing you again, Kieran admitted with brutal honesty. Because I've spent every day of the past year missing you, and the thought of a lifetime without you feels like death itself. And what about the war? What about all the people who will die? Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on their sleeping son. I won't lie to you anymore, Luna. War is coming, whether you stay or go. Celeste's father has been looking for an excuse to expand his territory for years. My broken engagement is simply the justification he needed. Luna felt something shift inside her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that you leaving won't stop the bloodshed. It might delay it, give Celeste's pride time to heal and allow her to claim victory. But my refusing to marry her was just the final straw, not the root cause of this conflict. Kieran moved closer, his eyes intense with desperate hope. I'm also saying that I love you more than my own life, more than my crown, more than anything in this world except our son. And if there's any chance at all, that you might be able to forgive me, to trust me again, to build something real and lasting together, then I want to fight for it. How can I trust you? Luna asked, her voice breaking. You lied to me about everything. Who you were, why you had to leave, whether you would come back. How do I know this isn't just another beautiful lie? Because I have nothing left to hide, Kieran replied. You know the worst of me now. You know I'm a coward who ran from love, a liar who deceived the woman he cherished, a king who put politics before his heart. If you can love me despite all of that, then what we build together will be stronger than any foundation of lies. Before Luna could respond, Aiden began to fuss, his small cries filling the chamber. Both parents moved toward the cradle simultaneously, their hands brushing as they reached for their son. The contact sent electricity through Luna's entire body, that same connection that had always existed between them flaring to life despite everything that had happened. Let me, Kieran said softly, and Luna nodded, stepping back as he gently lifted Aiden from the cradle. Their son immediately settled in his father's arms, his small hand grasping Kieran's finger with surprising strength. Watching them together, seeing the wonder and love on Kieran's face as he held their child. Luna felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. This was what she wanted. A family, love, a future built on truth instead of necessity. But could she doom a kingdom for her own happiness? "I need more time," she whispered. "Time is something we don't have," Kieran replied, echoing Celeste's earlier words. "But whatever you decide, I want you to know. I will love you until my last breath, whether that's tomorrow on a battlefield or 50 years from now in our marriage bed." As he placed Aiden back in his cradle and moved toward the door, Luna felt panic rise in her chest. Was this goodbye? Was she about to watch the love of her life walk away forever? "Kieran," she called, and he stopped, his hand on the door handle. "Whatever I decide," she said quietly, "know that I love you too. I always have, and I always will." That was never the question. The smile that crossed his face was heartbreaking in its beauty and pain. "Then we'll face whatever comes together, one way or another." After he left, Luna sank into the chair by the window, her heart heavier than ever. The choice remained impossible, but now she understood that there might not be a right answer at all. Sometimes love meant making the hardest decision of all, choosing to fight for happiness in a world determined to destroy it. Chapter 15. The decision dawn was still hours away when Luna made her choice. She sat in the darkness of her chamber, Aiden sleeping peacefully in her arms, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. Princess Celeste's words echoed in her mind. The warnings about war, about the lives that would be lost, about the impossibility of happiness built on others' suffering. But stronger than Celeste's logic was the memory of Kieran's face when he held their son, the raw love and desperate hope she had seen in his eyes. She could run. She could disappear into the night with Aiden and spare everyone the complications of her existence. But running hadn't saved her from heartbreak before, and it wouldn't save anyone from the war that was coming regardless of her choice. At least if she stayed, if she fought for the love that had survived lies and separation and royal politics, she would be fighting for something real. The decision made, Luna felt a strange calm settle over her. She dressed carefully in the finest gown the castle servants had provided, arranged her hair with shaking hands, and settled Aiden in his cradle with a whispered promise that whatever happened, she would never stop fighting for their family's future. The castle was already stirring when she made her way through the corridors, servants beginning their daily routines despite the early hour. Several stopped to stare at her, the mysterious woman from the Rose Tower walking freely through the halls, but she ignored their curious gazes and continued toward her destination. The throne room was empty except for a few guards, but Luna knew Kieran would be there soon. He always began his days before dawn, reviewing reports and preparing for the impossible tasks that faced him. She settled herself to wait, using the time to gather courage for the conversation that would determine both their fates. "Luna?" Kieran's voice carried shock and hope in equal measure as he entered the throne room and found her standing before the great windows. "What are you doing here?" She turned to face him, noting the same haggard appearance, the same exhaustion that seemed to weigh down his powerful frame. "I came to give you my answer." Kieran's face went very still. "And what is your answer?" "I choose you," Luna said simply. "I choose us. I choose to fight for what we have instead of running from what we fear." The relief that washed over Kieran's features was devastating in its intensity. He crossed the distance between them in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms with desperate fervor. For a moment, they simply held each other, both trembling with the magnitude of what they had just committed to. "Are you certain?" Kieran whispered against her hair. "Once we take this path, there's no going back. Celeste will never forgive the slight, and her father will find reasons for war whether I stay or go," Luna finished. "You told me that yourself. At least this way, we face whatever comes together." Kieran pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "I love you," he said, as if the words were a prayer. I have loved you since the moment I saw you across those festival flames, and I will love you until my heart stops beating." "And I love you," Luna replied, her own tears flowing freely now. "All of you. Santiago the merchant who stole my heart, Xavier the advisor who protected me, and Kieran the king who chose love over duty. I love every facet of the man you are." Their kiss was desperate and tender, a claiming and a promise rolled into one. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together as they tried to absorb the reality of what they had just committed to. "There's something I need to tell you," Kieran said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've already declared my intention to make you my queen to the council. Half of them have withdrawn their support, and Princess Celeste has convinced her father that this is an act of war. We have perhaps 2 weeks before Ravencrest armies reach our borders." Luna felt her stomach clench with fear, but her resolve held firm. "Then we have 2 weeks to prepare, to rally those who will stand with us and make ready for whatever comes." "We?" Kieran's smile was radiant despite the dire circumstances. "You're truly willing to stand beside me, even knowing what it might cost?" "I'm willing to stand beside you because I know what it might cost," Luna corrected. "Love without sacrifice isn't love at all. It's just convenience, and I've never wanted convenient with you." Before Kieran could respond, the throne room doors burst open. Darius strode in, his face grim with urgent news, followed by Captain Orion and several other advisors. All of them stopped short when they saw Luna in Kieran's arms, clearly not expecting to find the king in such an intimate moment. "Your Majesty," Darius said after a moment's awkward silence, "forgive the intrusion, but we have reports from the border scouts. Ravencrest forces are moving faster than anticipated." "How much time do we have?" Kieran asked, his arm still around Luna's waist in a gesture of unmistakable claiming. "A week, perhaps less," Orion replied. "They're pushing hard, traveling light. This isn't a show of force, it's a conquest army." Luna felt Kieran's body tense against hers, saw the weight of leadership settle back onto his shoulders like a familiar burden. But when he looked at her, his eyes held no regret, only determination. "Then we make our preparations," he said firmly. "Send word to every lord who remains loyal. Call up the reserves. Fortify the eastern passes." He paused, then added with quiet authority, "And prepare for a royal wedding." The silence that followed was profound. Darius looked as if he might faint, while the other advisors exchanged glances that ranged from shock to resignation. "Your Majesty," Darius began carefully, "given the current crisis, perhaps it would be wise to delay—" "No more delays," Kieran interrupted. "Luna has agreed to be my queen, and I'll not risk losing her to politics or war. We will marry within the week, before the fighting begins." "And if we lose?" one of the other advisors asked quietly. Kieran's smile was fierce with protective love as he looked down at Luna. "Then at least we'll face defeat as husband and wife, fighting for something worth dying for." As the advisors filed out to begin their preparations, Luna marveled at the change in Kieran. The man who had once hidden behind masks and false names now stood ready to declare his love before God and kingdom, regardless of the consequences. Whatever came next, they would face it together. War might be coming, but love has already won the most important battle. Chapter 16. Preparations for War and Wedding. The next 5 days passed in a whirlwind of frantic activity that transformed the castle into a buzzing hive of preparation for both war and celebration. Luna found herself caught between two realities. One moment discussing wedding arrangements with nervous servants, the next listening to military briefings that painted an increasingly grim picture of their defensive capabilities. Kieran barely slept, dividing his time between strategic planning with his remaining loyal lords and stolen moments with Luna and Aiden. The contrast between his public face, stern, commanding, every inch the warrior king, and his private tenderness with his family never failed to move her. When he held their son, speaking softly of the future they would build together, Luna could almost forget that armies were marching toward their borders. The Eastern Pass fortifications are nearly complete, Captain Orion reported during the morning briefing. But we're still outnumbered 3-1, possibly worse when Ravencrest's allies join them. What about potential reinforcements? Kieran asked, studying the maps spread across the war table. Lords Garrett and Westmarch have pledged their house guards, Darius replied, his voice carefully neutral. But several others remain uncommitted. They're waiting to see which way the wind blows. Luna, standing quietly in the corner with Aiden in her arms, felt the weight of their situation settling over her like a shroud. So many men questioning their king's judgment, so many preparing to abandon him in his hour of need. All because he had chosen to love her. "What if I spoke to them?" she asked suddenly, drawing surprised looks from everyone in the room. "My lady?" Darius seemed genuinely confused by the suggestion. "The uncommitted lords?" Luna clarified, shifting Aiden to her other arm. "They see me as the problem, the reason their king has lost his mind. What if I met with them personally, showed them that I'm not some scheming seductress but simply a woman who loves her family?" Kieran's expression was immediate and absolute rejection. "Absolutely not. I won't have you subjected to their judgment or potential insults." "With respect, Your Majesty," Luna replied, straightening her shoulders. "If I'm to be queen, I need to learn to face such challenges. Besides, what harm could come from trying? They already think the worst of me." The debate that followed was intense but brief. In the end, pragmatism won out. They needed every possible advantage, every potential ally. If Luna could convince even 1 or 2 wavering lords to stand with them, it might make the difference between survival and catastrophe. The first meeting was with Lord Aldrich, a graying veteran who had served Kieran's father faithfully for decades. He received Luna in his pavilion with stiff formality, his expression making clear his disapproval of the entire situation. "My lady," he began without preamble, "you must understand the position you've placed us all in. The king's attachment to you threatens everything we've worked to build." "I understand that my presence complicates things," Luna replied calmly. "But I also know that King Kieran loves his people and would never intentionally put them at risk. If he believes our union strengthens rather than weakens the kingdom, perhaps it's worth considering why." "Pretty words," Lord Aldrich replied. "But what do you know of ruling? Of the sacrifices leadership demands? You're a village girl who caught a king's fancy. That hardly qualifies you to guide a realm." Luna felt anger flare in her chest, but kept her voice level. "You're right. I know nothing of statecraft or political maneuvering. But I know love, loyalty, and sacrifice. I know what it means to fight for your family even when the odds seem impossible. And I know that King Kieran is a better man, and a better king, when he's fighting for something he believes in rather than simply fulfilling obligations." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, Luna fielding increasingly pointed questions about her background, her intentions, and her fitness for the crown. By the end, Lord Aldrich's hostility had softened to grudging respect, though he made no firm commitments. Similar meetings followed with other lords, each presenting its own challenges and small victories. Some remained unmoved, convinced that Kieran's choice spelled doom for the kingdom. Others began to see Luna not as a threat, but as evidence of their king's humanity and passion. "You're winning them over," Kieran said that evening as they shared a quiet dinner in his private chambers. Aiden slept peacefully in a basket nearby, his small chest rising and falling with the rhythm of innocent dreams. "Some of them," Luna corrected. "Others think I'm an ambitious peasant who seduced their king for personal gain." "And what do you think?" Kieran asked, reaching across the small table to take her hand. Luna considered the question seriously. "I think I'm a woman who fell in love with a good man who happened to be king. I think I'm terrified of the responsibility that comes with a crown, but I'm more terrified of losing the family I've found. And I think that if love can't survive the test of adversity, then it wasn't worth much to begin with." Kieran brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Tomorrow is our wedding day. The simple statement carried so much weight, joy, fear, hope, and the knowledge that they might be celebrating their union on the eve of battle. Luna felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Are you having second thoughts?" she asked quietly. "Never," Kieran replied without hesitation. "Whatever tomorrow brings, whatever the future holds, I want to face it as your husband and Aiden's father. Nothing else matters more than that." As they sat together in the flickering candlelight, Luna marveled at how far they had come from that first night at the Harvest Festival. Tomorrow, she would become a queen. Soon after, they might be fighting for their very lives, but tonight they were simply a family bound by love and sustained by hope. It would have to be enough. Chapter 17. A Crown of Love. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and mist-shrouded, as if the very sky reflected the uncertainty that hung over the kingdom. Luna stood before the mirror in her chamber, staring at her reflection with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The wedding gown, a creation of ivory silk and delicate lacework that had been completed by an army of seamstresses working through the night, transformed her from a displaced village woman into something that actually looked like a queen. "You're beautiful, my lady," whispered Elena, the young maid who had been assigned to help her prepare. "Like something from a fairy tale." If only fairy tales included the threat of imminent war, Luna thought wryly. Through her window, she could see the final preparations for the ceremony taking place in the castle's great courtyard. Despite the political crisis, despite the armies marching toward their borders, Kieran had insisted on a public wedding. Their love, he declared, would not be hidden or diminished by fear. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Elena's return with some final accessory. Instead, Darius entered, his expression grave but kind. In his hands was a small velvet box that he presented to her with ceremony. "From His Majesty," he said simply, "with his love and the hope that you'll wear them with pride." Luna opened the box to reveal a set of jewelry that took her breath away. A necklace, earrings, and a delicate crown all crafted from white gold and set with sapphires the exact color of storm clouds. They were beautiful beyond description, but more importantly, they carried meaning that made her heart clench with emotion. "The stones match his eyes," she whispered. "And yours," Darius replied softly. He had them made specially for today. The crown? It was his mother's, reset to accommodate the new stones. "She would have loved you, my lady. You have the same fierce spirit, the same capacity for love that puts others before yourself." Luna felt tears threaten, but she blinked them back. This was not a day for sorrow, regardless of what tomorrow might bring. "Help me put them on." As Darius carefully placed the crown on her head, Luna felt the weight of it, not just the physical heft of gold and jewels, but the symbolic burden of responsibility it represented. She was about to become queen of a kingdom in crisis, wife to a man who had risked everything for love, and mother to a child whose very existence had helped spark a war. "Are you ready, Your Majesty?" Darius asked, and Luna realized it was the first time anyone had addressed her by her new title. "As ready as anyone can be," she replied, lifting her chin with newfound determination. The walk to the courtyard felt endless and instantaneous at the same time. Luna was dimly aware of the crowds gathered to witness the ceremony, a mix of loyal lords, castle servants, and common folk who had been granted entrance to witness their king's wedding, but her attention was entirely focused on the figure waiting for her at the altar. Kieran stood tall and magnificent in his formal court attire, a black doublet embroidered with silver wolves, his crown catching the weak sunlight that had finally begun to break through the clouds. But it was his face that stole her breath, the wonder and love and absolute adoration that shone from his gray eyes as he watched her approach. When she reached his side, he took her hands in his touch warm and steady despite the magnitude of the moment. You're trembling, he murmured for her ears alone. So are you, she replied, and they shared a smile that felt intimate despite the hundreds of witnesses surrounding them. The ceremony that followed was a blur of ancient words and solemn vows. Luna heard herself promise to love, honor, and cherish the man beside her, to stand with him through prosperity and adversity, to be his queen and partner in all things. When Kieran spoke his own vows, his voice carried across the courtyard with ringing clarity, leaving no doubt about his feelings or his commitment. I take you, Luna, to be my wife and queen, he declared. Before God and these witnesses, I pledge my life, my crown, and my heart to you and to our son. Whatever trials we face them together. Whatever joys await us, we'll share them as one. You are my love, my strength, and my salvation. When the priest finally pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran's kiss was tender and fierce and full of promise. The crowd erupted in cheers. Whether from genuine celebration or political necessity, Luna couldn't tell, but the sound was joyous nonetheless. As they turned to face their subjects, Kieran's arm around her waist, Luna felt a moment of perfect peace. Whatever came next, whatever battles they would have to fight, they would face them united. She was no longer Luna, the displaced village woman. She was Queen Luna of Valdris, beloved wife and fierce protector of everything she held dear. The celebration feast that followed was subdued by the circumstances but genuine in its warmth. Even some of the lords who had opposed the marriage offered respectful congratulations, apparently impressed by Luna's dignity and grace under pressure. But as evening fell and the revelries wound down, reality reasserted itself. Captain Orion approached the high table with news that chilled Luna's blood. Your Majesties, he said quietly, our scouts report that Ravencrest forces have reached the Eastern Valley. They'll be at our borders by tomorrow evening. The honeymoon, such as it was, would last exactly 1 day before war came calling. But as Luna looked at her husband, her king, she saw not fear, but determination in his eyes. They had chosen love. Now they would fight to defend it. Chapter 18. The Calm Before Storm. The first morning of their marriage began before dawn, with urgent reports that shattered any illusion of peaceful wedded bliss. Luna woke to find Kieran already dressed and preparing to leave their chambers, his face grim with the weight of impending crisis. How long? She asked, not needing to specify what she meant. Hours, Kieran replied, pausing in his preparations to sit on the edge of their bed. Ravencrest's advance scouts were spotted at dawn. The main force can't be far behind. Luna sat up, pulling a robe around herself as the magnitude of their situation settled over her like a shroud. Their wedding had been beautiful, their one night together as husband and wife tender and passionate. But now reality crashed back with brutal force. What about Aiden? She asked, fearful for their son overriding every other concern. Safe, Kieran assured her immediately. I've arranged for him to be taken to the mountain stronghold with a trusted guard. If things go badly here, he'll be protected. The unspoken words hung heavy between them. If they didn't survive the coming battle, at least their son would live to carry on his father's bloodline. Luna felt tears threaten but forced them back. This was not the time for weakness. I want to see him before he goes, she said firmly. Of course, but first, there's something we need to discuss. Kieran's expression grew even more serious. The council is meeting in an hour to finalize our defensive strategy. They'll expect you to attend as queen. Luna's stomach clenched. I don't know anything about military tactics. You don't need to, Kieran replied, taking her hands in his. But you need to be seen standing with me, showing unity and strength. The lords who wavered in their support will be watching for any sign of discord or weakness. An hour later, Luna found herself in the war room, standing beside Kieran's chair as maps and reports covered every surface. The assembled lords and commanders studied her with expressions ranging from resignation to grudging respect. She wore a simple blue gown, practical but elegant, and the crown Kieran had given her, feeling both regal and completely out of place. "Report," Kieran commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. 15,000 men approaching from the east," Captain Orion began, his weathered face grim. "Heavy cavalry, siege engines, and what appears to be a significant contingent of sellswords. Princess Celeste's father is taking no chances." "Our numbers?" Kieran asked. 8,000 committed, with perhaps 2,000 more if the remaining uncommitted lords decide to honor their oaths, Lord Aldrich replied. "We're badly outnumbered, but our position is strong. The Eastern Pass forces them into a narrow approach where their superior numbers count for less." Luna listened as the discussion turned to tactics, supply lines, and defensive positions. She understood little of the military jargon, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. They were preparing for a battle they might not survive, making plans that assumed the worst while hoping for the best. "What of negotiation?" she asked suddenly, drawing surprised looks from around the table. "Has anyone attempted to open diplomatic channels?" Lord Marcus snorted derisively. "You can't negotiate with someone who views your very existence as an insult, Your Majesty." "But Princess Celeste is intelligent and pragmatic," Luna persisted. "Surely there's some arrangement that could—" "No." Kieran's voice cut through her suggestion with absolute finality. "I won't trade you for peace, Luna. Not now, not ever. We will find another way." The meeting continued for another hour, with increasingly detailed discussions of battle formations and contingency plans. When it finally ended, Luna felt drained by the weight of impending violence and her own helplessness in the face of it. "Come," Kieran said, taking her arm. "Let's see our son before he leaves for safety." They found Aiden in the nursery, attended by the wet nurse who would accompany him to the mountain stronghold. The baby seemed to sense the tension around him, fussing more than usual and refusing to settle. When Kieran picked him up, Aiden immediately calmed, his small hand grasping his father's finger with desperate strength. "He knows," Luna whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Somehow, he knows this might be goodbye." "It's not goodbye," Kieran said fiercely, though his own voice was thick with emotion. "We're going to survive this. We're going to win. And when it's over, we'll bring him home to a kingdom at peace." They spent the next hour with their son, memorizing every detail of his face, every sound he made, every small movement that marked him as theirs. When the time came for his departure, Luna thought her heart might break entirely. Kissing his tiny forehead, she whispered promises she prayed she would live to keep. "Protect him," Kieran told the guard captain who would escort Aiden to safety. "With your life." "With our lives, Your Majesty," the man replied solemnly. As their son's carriage disappeared into the distance, Luna felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened next, Aiden was safe. They had given him the best chance possible at a future, even if they couldn't be part of it. "No regrets?" Kieran asked, putting his arm around her shoulders as they stood on the castle battlements watching the eastern horizon where their enemies approached. "None," Luna replied, and meant it. "Whatever the cost, we chose love over fear. That's worth fighting for." In the distance, they could see the first glints of armor and banners as Ravencrest's army came into view. The siege of Valdris was about to begin, but Luna no longer felt afraid. She was a queen now, standing beside her king, ready to fight for everything they held dear. The storm was coming, but they would weather it together. Chapter 19. The Siege Begins. The first arrows fell like deadly rain just after sunset, clattering against the castle's stone walls and sending defenders scrambling for cover. Luna stood at the window of the Great Hall, watching the eastern approach fill with enemy forces as far as the eye could see. Campfires dotted the landscape like fallen stars, and the sound of war preparations, hammering, shouting, the creak of siege engines being assembled, carried clearly on the evening air. "Get away from the window," Kieran commanded, his voice sharp with worry as he entered the hall still wearing his battle armor. Archers can reach that high from their position on the ridge." Luna reluctantly stepped back, but her eyes remained fixed on the enemy encampment. "So many," she whispered. I knew the numbers, but seeing them— "Numbers aren't everything," Kieran replied, though she could hear the strain in his voice. "We have advantages they don't: strong walls, motivated defenders, and knowledge of the terrain." As if to contradict his words, a massive boulder launched from a trebuchet crashed into the castle's outer wall, sending stone fragments flying and eliciting cheers from the besieging army. The siege had officially begun. The next several hours passed in a blur of organized chaos. Luna found herself pressed into service helping coordinate supplies and medical preparations, her inexperience with warfare offset by her natural leadership abilities and the respect she had gradually earned from the castle staff. When word came that the first assault on the gates had been repelled, she felt a momentary surge of hope. "How long can we hold them?" she asked Darius during a brief respite. "If they maintain conventional siege tactics, weeks, possibly months," the advisor replied. "Our stores are well stocked, and the walls are strong. But if they have other plans—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Luna had heard enough military discussions to understand that modern sieges could involve tactics far more devastating than simple starvation and bombardment. Near midnight, she made her way to the battlements where Kieran commanded the defense. He stood with Captain Orion and several other officers, studying the enemy positions by torchlight and planning the next day's defensive strategies. When he saw her approaching, he immediately moved to intercept her. "Luna, you shouldn't be here," he said, his face streaked with grime and exhaustion. "It's too dangerous." "I'm not hiding in the keep while you risk your life on these walls," she replied firmly. "I'm queen now, which means I share both the privileges and the dangers of that position." Before Kieran could argue, a new sound cut through the night, the distinctive whistle of approaching projectiles. But these weren't stones or arrows. Luna watched in horrified fascination as flaming containers arced through the air, smashing against the castle walls and exploding into sheets of liquid fire. "Greek fire," Captain Orion cursed. "They have alchemical weapons." The implications were devastating. Greek fire burned on stone and water alike, could eat through traditional defenses, and created toxic smoke that could suffocate defenders even behind strong walls. This wasn't going to be a conventional siege after all. "Fall back to the inner courtyard," Kieran commanded, his voice carrying across the battlements. "Organize bucket brigades and prepare the secondary defenses." As they retreated deeper into the castle, Luna felt the first touch of real despair. Their strong walls were becoming a liability, trapping them inside while the enemy used weapons they had no effective counter for. The smell of burning stone and something fouler began to permeate the air. "There has to be something we can do," Luna said as they reached the relative safety of the inner keep. "Some way to break the siege before they burn us out." "There is," Kieran replied grimly. "But you won't like it." Luna studied his face, seeing resignation and determination warring in his gray eyes. "Tell me." "A sortie. A concentrated attack on their siege engines while they're focused on the bombardment. If we can destroy their alchemical supplies and trebuchets, we can force them back to conventional tactics." "That's suicide," Luna said immediately. "You'd have to leave the protection of the walls, expose yourself to their full force." "It's our only chance," Kieran replied. "And it has to be me leading it. The men need to see their king willing to risk everything for the kingdom." Luna felt the world tilt around her. They had been married for less than 2 days, and now he was talking about leading what amounted to a suicide charge against overwhelming odds. The rational part of her mind knew he was right. Desperate times called for desperate measures. But her heart rebelled against the thought of losing him so soon after finding him again. "There has to be another way," she said desperately. "Luna." Kieran took her hands in his touch gentle despite the steel gauntlets he wore. "This is what it means to be king. Sometimes you have to make choices that tear your heart out, because they're the only choices available. Through the window, they could hear the continued bombardment and the increasingly frantic shouts of defenders trying to control the spreading fires. Time was running out, and Luna realized that she was about to face the ultimate test of being a royal spouse, watching the man she loved ride into almost certain death because duty demanded it. "When?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dawn," Kieran replied, while they're tired from the night assault and not expecting a counterattack. 4 hours. They had 4 hours before he might die for their kingdom, their love, and the future they had dreamed of building together. Luna straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. If her husband was going to be a hero, then she would be worthy of loving one. "Then we make the most of the time we have," she said firmly, "and we trust that love is strong enough to bring you home to me." Chapter 20. The Price of Love. The hours before dawn were the longest of Luna's life. She and Kieran spent them in their chambers, holding each other with desperate intensity while the sounds of the siege raged beyond their walls. They spoke of their son, of the future they hoped to build, of all the dreams that hung in the balance with the coming sunrise. "Promise me something," Luna whispered as they lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "Anything," Kieran replied, his fingers stroking through her hair. "Promise me that if this goes wrong, if you don't come back, you won't regret choosing love over duty. Don't die thinking that marrying me was a mistake." Kieran was quiet for so long that Luna began to fear she had voiced her deepest insecurity. But when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Luna, my beloved queen, I need you to understand something. Every moment of happiness I've known in my adult life has been connected to you. The 3 nights we spent together as Santiago and Luna, the weeks of getting to know you again as Xavier and the displaced woman with the mysterious child. Yesterday, when I watched you become my wife and queen, those moments are worth more than any crown, any kingdom, any political alliance." He turned to face her in the dim light, his gray eyes intense with conviction. "If I die today, I will die as a man who chose love over fear, truth over deception, family over convenience. There could be no better death for a king." As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, Kieran rose to prepare for what might be his final battle. Luna helped him dress in his armor, her hands steady despite the tears that threatened to fall. When he was fully armed, he looked every inch the warrior king, dangerous, magnificent, and heartbreakingly mortal. "Take this," Luna said, removing a small pendant from around her neck. It was the wolf seal he had left with her over a year ago, the token of his love that had sustained her through exile and despair. "Bring it back to me." Kieran accepted the pendant with hands that trembled slightly, fastening it beneath his armor where it would rest against his heart. "And if I don't, then it dies with the man I love, which is where it belongs," Luna replied simply. Their final kiss was fierce and tender, a promise and a farewell rolled into one. When they broke apart, Luna saw her own tears reflected in Kieran's eyes. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied. "Now go save our kingdom so we can raise our son in peace." Luna watched from the battlements as Kieran led his sortie through the castle gates. 200 of their best men followed their king into the pale dawn light, their battle cries echoing off the stone walls as they charged toward the enemy encampment. The sight was both glorious and terrifying, heroes riding to almost certain death because no other choice remained. The battle that followed was chaos incarnate. Luna could see fragments of the action through the smoke and dust, Kieran's banner moving through the enemy lines like a bright sword, the explosive destruction of a trebuchet, men falling on both sides as the desperate gambit played out. The sounds were worse than the sights, screams of pain and fury, the clash of metal on metal, the roar of flames consuming siege engines. For what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, The outcome hung in the balance. Then, gradually, Luna began to see enemy forces pulling back from their positions, their siege weapons burning or destroyed. The sortie was working, but at what cost? There! Captain Orion pointed toward a knot of fighting near the enemy command tent. The king! Luna's heart stopped as she saw Kieran engaged in single combat with a massive figure she recognized from portraits. Lord Commander Garrett of Ravencrest, Princess Celeste's champion and one of the most feared warriors in the known world. The two men circled each other like predators, their weapons gleaming in the morning sun. The duel seemed to last forever. Luna gripped the battlements so hard her knuckles went white, every fiber of her being focused on the man she loved as he fought for both their lives. When Garrett's sword caught Kieran across the shoulder, Luna's gasp was audible even over the sounds of battle. When Kieran's counterstrike found its mark, she felt a surge of fierce pride. Finally, impossibly, Garrett fell. Kieran stood over his defeated opponent, swaying with exhaustion, but alive. The surviving enemy forces, seeing their champion defeated and their siege engines destroyed, began a hasty retreat toward their main camp. The sortie had succeeded, but as the survivors limped back toward the castle gates, Luna could see how dearly the victory had cost them. Less than half the men who had charged out with their king were returning, and many of those bore wounds that spoke of desperate fighting. When Kieran finally reached the courtyard, Luna was waiting for him. He was covered in blood, his own and others, and his armor was battered almost beyond recognition. But he was alive, and when he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made all the terror of the past hours worthwhile. "Did we win?" Luna asked as she helped support his wounded form. "We bought time," Kieran replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Damaged their ability to maintain the siege, but this isn't over. Celeste's father won't retreat after one setback." As if summoned by his words, a horn sounded from the enemy camp, not a retreat but a call for parley. A single rider approached the castle under a white banner, and Luna's blood chilled as she recognized the figure. Princess Celeste had come to negotiate personally, and something in her bearing suggested that the real battle was just beginning. Chapter 21. The Devil's Bargain. Princess Celeste sat across from Kieran and Luna in the castle's great hall like a queen holding court in enemy territory. Despite the failure of her father's siege, despite the destruction of their siege engines and the death of their champion, she appeared completely composed. Her green eyes held no trace of defeat, only calculating intelligence and barely restrained fury. "Your Majesty," she said to Kieran, her voice dripping with false courtesy, "how terribly you look. I do hope your wounds aren't too severe." Kieran, his shoulder bound but his bearing still regal, met her gaze without flinching. "I've suffered worse and recovered. What brings you to my hall under a flag of truce, Princess?" "Practicality," Celeste replied smoothly. "Your little sortie was quite impressive, I'll grant you. But surely even you can see that this situation is unsustainable. My father's armies will regroup, resupply, and return in greater numbers. Meanwhile, your kingdom bleeds resources and men you can't afford to lose." Luna felt tension coiling in her stomach. There was something in Celeste's manner that suggested this wasn't a plea for mercy or an offer of surrender. This felt like the opening move in a game far more dangerous than open warfare. "What do you propose?" Luna asked, drawing Celeste's attention to her for the first time since entering the hall. The famous Luna," Celeste said, studying her with undisguised interest. "The peasant girl who became a queen. How remarkably quaint." The insult was delivered with a smile, but its intent was unmistakable. Luna felt Kieran tense beside her, his protective instincts flaring, but she placed a gentle hand on his arm. She could handle Princess Celeste's verbal sparring. "I prefer to think of myself as a woman who chose love over convenience," Luna replied evenly. "Though I understand such concepts might be foreign to those raised in political marriages." Celeste's smile sharpened like a blade. "Love. Yes, let's discuss love. Specifically, how far you're willing to let it lead you down the path to destruction. She rose from her chair, beginning to pace the hall like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. Your husband's romantic impulses have already cost him half his noble support, brought war to his kingdom, and endangered thousands of innocent lives. How many more will die for the sake of your love? That's enough, Kieran growled. But Celeste continued as if he hadn't spoken. But I'm a reasonable woman, she said, her voice taking on a tone of magnanimous generosity. I'm prepared to offer terms that could end this conflict immediately and save countless lives. Name them, Luna said, though every instinct screamed that she didn't want to hear what was coming. Simple, Celeste replied. You renounce all claims to the throne, divorce Kieran, and disappear permanently from the kingdom. In exchange, your son will be legitimized as a royal bastard with full inheritance rights should Kieran die without other heirs. The child would be raised at court, given every advantage of rank and education. The proposal hit Luna like a physical blow. Celeste was offering to save Aiden's future at the cost of their family's unity. The child would live in luxury and eventually inherit, but would grow up believing his mother had abandoned him for political expediency. Furthermore, Celeste continued, warming to her theme, Kieran and I would marry as originally planned, securing the alliance between our kingdoms and ensuring peace for both our peoples. A few thousand lives spared, political stability restored, and your son guaranteed a royal future. Really, it's quite generous. The answer is no, Kieran said immediately, his voice carrying absolute finality. I wasn't asking you, Celeste replied sharply. This decision belongs to your wife. She's the one who must choose between personal happiness and the greater good. Luna felt the weight of every gaze in the hall, but none more so than Kieran's. She could see the trust and love in his gray eyes, the absolute faith that she would never abandon him or their marriage. But she could also see the exhaustion, the knowledge that their kingdom was dying around them while they fought for personal happiness. You're asking me to sacrifice my family for politics, Luna said slowly. I'm asking you to save thousands of lives by making one selfless choice, Celeste corrected. Isn't that what queens do? Put the needs of the many above their own desires? The hall fell silent except for the distant sounds of siege preparations and wounded men. Luna closed her eyes, trying to sort through the impossible choice Celeste had presented. Save her marriage and watch a kingdom burn, or sacrifice everything she loved to spare innocent lives. How do I know you'll keep your word about Aiden? Luna asked finally. Luna? Kieran said sharply, clearly alarmed by the direction of her thoughts. Because it serves my interests, Celeste replied pragmatically. A legitimized bastard with inheritance rights actually strengthens the crown's stability. And frankly, I'm not so petty as to punish a child for his parents' choices. Luna opened her eyes, meeting Celeste's gaze directly. And if I refuse, if we continue to fight? Then you'll watch your husband die by inches as this siege drags on. His kingdom will crumble, his people will suffer, and eventually you'll lose everything anyway, including each other. Celeste's voice softened with false sympathy. At least this way, something good comes from all the pain. The princess moved toward the door, her negotiation apparently complete. You have until sunset to decide, Your Majesty. Choose wisely, for everyone's sake. After she left, Luna and Kieran sat in silence, the weight of impossible choices settling over them like a shroud. Outside, the sounds of war preparation continued, but inside the hall there was only the devastating quiet of two people confronting the potential end of everything they had fought to build. Tell me you're not actually considering her offer, Kieran said finally. Luna looked at her husband, wounded, exhausted, but still magnificent in his stubborn determination to fight for their love. I'm considering whether I love you enough to save you from yourself, she replied quietly. And in that moment, Luna realized that sometimes the greatest act of love was the willingness to break your own heart to protect what mattered most. Chapter 22. The ultimate sacrifice. The hours between Celeste's ultimatum and sunset passed like a fever dream. Luna wandered the castle corridors like a ghost, her mind churning with impossible choices, while Kieran threw himself into fortification preparations with desperate energy. They barely spoke during those agonizing hours, both understanding that words might shatter the fragile hope they were clinging to. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Luna found herself in the chapel where they had been married just 2 days earlier. The space still held the ghost of celebration: wilted flowers, abandoned ribbons, the lingering scent of incense and joy. It seemed impossible that so much had changed in such a short time. "I thought I might find you here," Kieran's voice came from behind her, soft and understanding. Luna didn't turn around, afraid that seeing his face would break her resolve. "I've been praying for guidance, for some sign of what the right choice might be." "And what has prayer told you?" Kieran asked, moving to stand beside her in the pew. "That sometimes love means sacrifice. That sometimes saving the thing you love most requires destroying yourself in the process." Luna's voice was steady, but Kieran could see her hands trembling. "Luna, no." His voice carried a desperate edge now. "Whatever you're thinking—" "I'm thinking about our son," Luna interrupted, finally turning to face him. "About the kingdom that hangs in the balance. About all the people who will die if this war continues. And what about us? What about the love we fought so hard to preserve?" Luna reached up to touch his face, memorizing every line and angle. "Our love doesn't disappear because we're separated. It just changes form, becomes something different, maybe something stronger." Kieran caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek as if he could anchor her to him through touch alone. "I won't let you do this. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for my mistakes." "They weren't mistakes," Luna said firmly. "Loving me, marrying me, fighting for our family. None of that was wrong. But continuing to fight when there's another way, that would be the mistake." Before Kieran could respond, Captain Orion appeared in the chapel doorway, his face grim with urgency. "Your Majesties, forgive the intrusion, but Princess Celeste has returned for your answer. She waits in the courtyard with a small escort." Luna stood slowly, smoothing her skirts with hands that no longer trembled. The time for agonizing over choices had passed. She had made her decision, and now she had to find the strength to see it through. "Tell her I'll be there shortly," Luna said to Orion. After the captain departed, she turned back to Kieran. "I need you to promise me something." "I won't promise to let you go," Kieran said immediately. "Promise me that you'll be a good king, that you'll protect our people and build the kingdom we dreamed of. Promise me that you'll make sure Aiden knows his mother loved him enough to ensure his future even if she couldn't be part of it. Promise me that you'll be a good king, that you'll protect our people and build the kingdom we dreamed of. Promise me that you'll make sure Aiden knows his mother loved him enough to ensure his future, even if she couldn't be part of it." Tears were streaming down Kieran's face now, his composure finally cracking under the weight of impending loss. "Luna, please, there has to be another way." "If there was, don't you think I would take it?" Luna asked gently. "I don't want to leave you. I don't want to give up our marriage or our family. But I want even less to watch you die for my sake. To see a kingdom burn because we were too selfish to make hard choices." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and heartbreak into the contact. When they broke apart, both were crying openly. "I love you," Luna whispered. "Remember that. Always. No matter what happens, no matter who you become or who you marry next, remember that you were loved completely and without reservation." "Luna—" But she was already walking away, her spine straight and her head high, despite the tears on her cheeks. In the courtyard, Princess Celeste waited with barely concealed satisfaction, clearly reading the answer in Luna's bearing before a single word was spoken. "Princess Celeste," Luna said formally, "I accept your terms with one modification." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Your Majesty. I want to see my son one more time before I leave, and I want your word that when he's old enough to understand, he'll be told the truth about why I left. Not that I abandoned him, but that I loved him enough to secure his future." "Agreed," Celeste said immediately. "The child can be brought back for a farewell visit. As for the truth, well, truth has a way of surfacing eventually, doesn't it?" The next hour passed in a blur of legal formalities and heartbreaking preparations. Documents were signed renouncing Luna's claim to the throne and dissolving her marriage to Kieran. Her personal belongings were packed into a small chest. She would leave as she had arrived, with almost nothing except the memories of what might have been. When Aiden was brought from the mountain stronghold for their final goodbye, Luna thought her heart might stop entirely. Her son had grown even in the few days since she'd seen him, and his gray eyes, so like his father's, seemed to look right through her soul. "Mama loves you," she whispered, holding him close while tears fell onto his soft hair. "Always remember that Mama loves you more than life itself." Kieran stood beside them, his face carved from stone, as he watched his wife say goodbye to their child. When Luna finally handed Aiden back to his wet nurse, Kieran spoke quietly. "I'll never forgive myself for this," he said. "Then find a way to forgive me instead," Luna replied, "because this is my choice, and I need you to live with it." As the sun set over the kingdom of Valdris, Luna walked out of the castle gates and toward an uncertain future. Behind her, she left a king who would spend the rest of his life wondering if love was worth the price it sometimes demanded, and a son who would grow up believing his mother had vanished into legend. But she also left a kingdom at peace, a child with a secure future, and the memory of a love so powerful it could survive even the ultimate sacrifice. Sometimes, that had to be enough. Chapter 23. The Price of Peace. 6 months had passed since Queen Luna's sacrifice, and King Kieran ruled over a kingdom that prospered in peace while his own soul withered with each passing day. The wedding to Princess Celeste had been a grand affair, politically necessary, strategically sound, and personally devastating. She was an intelligent and capable queen, managing court politics with ruthless efficiency, while Kieran threw himself into the work of rebuilding what the siege had damaged. But late at night, when the castle slept and official duties could no longer distract him, Kieran found himself in the nursery where Prince Aiden lived, under the care of the finest tutors and nurses money could provide. The boy was thriving, healthy, bright, and showing signs of the intelligence that marked the royal bloodline. Yet something in those gray eyes, so like his own, always seemed to be searching for something that wasn't there. "Papa?" Aiden said one evening as Kieran sat reading to him from a book of fairy tales. At 18 months, the boy's vocabulary was already impressive, another sign of his quick mind. "Yes, my son?" "Where's Mama?" It was a question Aiden had begun asking more frequently as he grew more aware of the world around him. Other children had mothers who visited, who held them, who sang them lullabies. Aiden had wet nurses and tutors and a father who loved him desperately, but no Mama. Kieran's throat tightened as he struggled to find an answer that was both truthful and age-appropriate. "Mama had to go away to keep you safe," he said finally. "But she loves you very much, even though she can't be here." "Mama come back?" The hope in that small voice nearly broke Kieran's heart. "I don't know, little prince. I hope so." After putting Aiden to bed, Kieran made his way to his private study, where Queen Celeste was waiting with reports from their network of spies and informants. She had proven to be an invaluable partner in statecraft, her political acumen complementing his military experience perfectly. Their marriage was successful by every measure except the one that mattered most to him. "Any word?" he asked without preamble, settling into the chair across from her desk. Celeste looked up from the documents she'd been reviewing, her expression carefully neutral. "The fishing village of Salmir reports a new healer who arrived several months ago. A young woman with golden hair who keeps to herself, but has proven remarkably skilled with both herbs and birthing complications? Kieran's pulse quickened. For months, he had tasked his most trusted agents with searching for any trace of Luna's whereabouts. The condition of her departure had specified only that she leave the kingdom permanently, not that she couldn't be found or occasionally observed from a distance. How reliable is the source? Very. The woman matches Luna's description, and her healing knowledge suggests someone with access to court physician's training. Celeste paused, then added more quietly, "She's built a small cottage near the shore. I live alone as far as anyone can tell." Kieran felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest for the first time in months. Luna was alive, was surviving, was perhaps even finding some small measure of peace in her exile. The knowledge that she was well was both relief and fresh torture. She was so close and yet completely beyond his reach. "There's something else," Celeste continued, her voice carrying a note of reluctance. "The villagers speak of her with great affection. She's helped deliver dozens of babies, saved lives with her healing skills, and asks for nothing more than basic necessities in return. They call her the Angel of Salmir." "Of course they do," Kieran said softly. Luna had always possessed a natural compassion that drew people to her. Even in exile, she was making the world around her better through her mere presence. Queen Celeste watched her husband's face with expressions that shifted between sympathy and something harder to define. Their political marriage had developed into a relationship of mutual respect and even affection, but she was not blind to the ghost that haunted their chambers. "You still love her?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Kieran replied without hesitation. "I will always love her. And yet you've honored our marriage, been faithful to your vows, and never asked me to release you from obligations." Celeste closed the report and fixed him with a direct stare. "Why?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "Because she sacrificed everything to give me the chance to be the king this realm needs. To dishonor that sacrifice by abandoning my responsibilities would make her suffering meaningless, even though it makes you miserable. My personal happiness is secondary to the welfare of the kingdom," Kieran replied, unconsciously echoing the words advisors had drilled into him since childhood. Luna understood that, even when I was too blinded by love to see it clearly. Celeste studied him with new understanding. She didn't just sacrifice herself for peace. She sacrificed herself to make you into the king you were meant to be. Perhaps, though the cost seems too high for any lesson. Before Celeste could respond, a commotion in the corridor outside drew their attention. Raised voices, the sound of guards moving quickly, and then a sharp knock on the study door. "Enter," Kieran called. Captain Orion stepped inside, his face grim with news that made Kieran's blood run cold. "Your Majesty, we've received word from the mountain stronghold. Prince Aiden has taken ill with a fever that won't break. The physicians, they're recommending you come immediately." The room spun around Kieran as the implications hit him. Aiden, his son, Luna's son, the child they had both sacrificed everything to protect, was fighting for his life while his mother lived in exile, unaware that her baby might be dying. "Prepare my horse," Kieran commanded, already moving toward the door. "And send word to Salmir. Tell the healer called the angel that a child needs her help." If there was any chance Luna could save their son, Kieran would bring her home. Consequences be damned. Some things were more important than political agreements, and a mother's love for her dying child was one of them. The race to save Prince Aiden was about to begin, and it would determine whether love could truly conquer all, or whether some sacrifices were too great to ever overcome. Chapter 24. A Mother's Love. Luna stood at the edge of the cliffs overlooking Salmir Harbor, watching the sun set over waters that carried both her tears and her prayers. 6 months of exile had taught her many things: how to live alone, how to heal both bodies and hearts, how to find purpose even in the depths of despair. But they had not taught her how to stop missing her son. Every night she dreamed of Aiden's laugh, of his tiny hands reaching for her, of the storm-gray eyes that held so much of his father in their depths. During the day, she threw herself into her work as the village healer, delivering babies and mending broken bones, telling herself that caring for other people's children could somehow fill the aching void where her own child used to live. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The sound of hoofbeats on the coastal road made her turn, expecting to see one of the village farmers returning from market. Instead, a royal messenger in the colors of Valdris came thundering toward her cottage, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. Luna's heart stopped. News from the capital could only mean one thing. Something had happened to Aiden or Kieran. With trembling hands, she waited as the messenger dismounted and approached her with a scroll bearing the royal seal. "My lady," the young man said, his voice breathless from urgency. "I bring word from His Majesty King Kieran. Prince Aiden has taken gravely ill with a fever that won't break. The king requests, no, he begs, for your immediate assistance as a healer." The scroll slipped from Luna's numb fingers, her world tilting as the meaning of the words crashed over her. Aiden was dying. Her baby, her son, the child she had given up everything to protect, was fighting for his life while she stood helpless on a distant shore. "How long has he been ill?" she asked, her healer's training overriding the panic that threatened to consume her. 3 days, my lady. The fever came on suddenly and shows no signs of breaking despite the efforts of the court physicians. 3 days. In a child so young, that was a lifetime of suffering. Luna's mind raced through possibilities. Childhood fevers could be anything from simple illness to deadly plague. Without seeing Aiden, without examining him personally, she could only guess at the cause and treatment. "Tell His Majesty I come immediately," Luna said, already moving toward her cottage to gather her supplies. "And tell him—" She paused, her voice breaking with emotion. "Tell him a mother will always answer when her child calls." The ride to the capital was a blur of desperate speed and agonizing fear. Luna pushed her horse to its limits, changing mounts at way stations and royal posts, her medical bag clutched against her chest like a talisman. Every mile that passed was another moment her son suffered without her, another heartbeat closer to a loss that would destroy her completely. She reached the castle as dawn broke over the battlements, her clothes travel-stained and her hair wild from the wind. Guards who had once bowed to her as queen now stared in surprise as the exiled healer rushed through gates that had once been her home. Kieran met her in the courtyard, and the sight of him nearly brought her to her knees. He looked haggard, older than his years, his gray eyes bright with desperation and exhaustion. Behind him stood Queen Celeste, her expression carefully neutral but not unkind. "Luna," Kieran breathed, and her name on his lips was both benediction and breaking. "Where is he?" Luna asked, her professional demeanor the only thing holding her together. "The nursery. The physicians have tried everything. Cooling baths, herbal drafts, bloodletting. Nothing touches the fever." Luna nodded grimly. "Take me to him. Now." The nursery was a scene of controlled chaos. Court physicians hovered around the small bed where Aiden lay burning with fever, his little body so still it terrified her. But it was the sound of his labored breathing that nearly broke Luna's resolve, the harsh, rattling wheeze that spoke of illness settling deep in his lungs. "Everyone out," Luna commanded, her voice carrying the authority of desperation. "Except the king." As the physicians filed out with obvious reluctance, Luna approached her son's bedside with trembling hands. Aiden was almost unrecognizable, his face flushed scarlet with fever, his breathing shallow and quick, his eyes closed in fitful sleep. But when she touched his forehead, those storm-gray eyes opened and fixed on her face with startling clarity. "Mama," he whispered, the word barely audible, but carrying the weight of 18 months of separation. "Yes, my darling," Luna said, tears streaming down her face as she began her examination. "Mama's here now. Mama's going to make you better." What she found during her careful assessment made her heart sink. This wasn't a simple childhood fever. Aiden showed signs of lung inflammation that could progress to something far more serious if not treated immediately. The court physicians had been treating the fever when they should have been addressing the underlying infection. "I need willowbark honey and chamomile," Luna said to Kieran without looking up from their son. "Also, hot water, clean clothes, and a brazier to heat the room. This isn't just fever, it's lung fever, and it's spreading." For the next several hours, Luna worked with single-minded determination to save her child's life. She administered careful doses of herbal preparations, used steam treatments to help clear Aiden's breathing, and employed techniques she had learned from traveling healers during her exile. Slowly, gradually, the fever began to break. As afternoon sunlight streamed through the nursery windows, Aiden's breathing finally eased into the peaceful rhythm of natural sleep. The crisis had passed, but the healing would take days more of careful attention. "Will he live?" Kieran asked quietly, speaking for the first time in hours. "Yes," Luna replied, exhaustion making her voice hoarse. "He'll live and be strong." But it was close, too close. Only then did she allow herself to truly look at Kieran, to see the man she had loved and lost standing just feet away. The urge to go to him, to seek comfort in his arms after the terror of nearly losing their son, was almost overwhelming. But Queen Celeste's presence in the doorway reminded her of the reality that hadn't changed despite this crisis. Luna was still exiled, still divorced, still the woman whose very existence threatened the political stability Kieran had worked so hard to rebuild. "Thank you," Kieran said simply. "You saved him." "I'm his mother," Luna replied. "It's what mothers do." As she prepared to leave, her duty as a healer fulfilled, her heart both full and breaking, Luna wondered if this brief reunion would have to last her a lifetime. She had held her son again, had seen him through his greatest crisis, but now she would have to say goodbye once more, unless someone found a way to change the rules of the game that had torn their family apart.